I'm ready when you are. Are we talking for 6 hours tonight? Is that how long you told me we need to go?
No, because you had said something earlier about counseling me, and I cannot do 6 hours.
Well, so here's the thing.
Roll his eyes at me. I love it.
You're looking at the entire photography enthusiast community of Dodge City, Texas. And so whenever I get asked to talk about photography, I'm ready to talk about photography because there's no one else around here to talk it with. So,
you know what? I'm not going to cut you off. I'll let you go.
Okay.
So you guys, if you feel like you've had enough of him, just hit end meeting and I'll catch you at the next one. I'm going to give people 1 more minute to get back in here and I'll get started. So yeah, I mean, so this is okay. I'm gonna. Do I want to admit this? I don't know. So for those of you in this room, I don't remember how I stumbled across you, Russell. It was probably through Instagram, and I think it was because you had posted some bear photos out of Alaska, and I'm going through my wildlife photography phase. And I'm just really looking for wildlife photos. And that just kind of caught my attention. And then I kind of looked at your page and looked a little bit more. And then I realized you were based in Texas. And because you're based in Texas and I'm from Texas, we therefore are going to be friends for life because that's how it works here. And I reached out to you and I said, this is what I do. Would you be interested in coming and doing this? And you were really, really sweet because you replied and said, look, I'm about to get on a float plane because I'm either going to Alaska or already in Alaska. But the short answer is yes, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks when I can, circle back. And I thought, okay. And I always take people at their word. And I thought, okay, it's been 2 weeks. Surely he's home now. And I thought, well, just be patient. And just a couple of days after that, you replied and said, hey, let's talk. And then it became more than just like, email. You were like, call me. And we ended up on the phone for a little bit. And I love talking to photographers because 1, you're doing the things that I like to do. And 2, I always learn from everyone. Sometimes it's, they're photographing things I'm not real interested in, but I still learn something. And I just think that that's a great way to connect with people. So that's one of the reasons we do the happiness hour. And I'm very happy that you're here. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready when you are. I was just going to go ahead. I was just going to make a comment.
Okay, you can. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I'm glad you told everybody because one of the things I tell everybody is I'm pretty good at returning email. Sometimes it may take me a few days, but I'm pretty good at returning it. I think I'm pretty close to batting 1,000 on returning people's email when they send something. And so I'm glad you just reiterated that to the whole group and to the whole world once this airs on YouTube, that I do indeed return emails. It may take me a few days, but I always try to get on it. Because like I said before, I mean, I'm the entire photography enthusiast community. I'm the one-man photo club for Dodge City, Texas Photo Club. So whenever I get a chance to talk photography, I always take advantage of it.
And you said that to me when we talked on the phone and I'm like, where's Dodge City? And I had to go look it up on a map and it's a dot. And you're like, I'm a one-man show. I'm it. So
population 320, I think, at the last census in Dodge City, which it's grown since I graduated. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you all the story a little bit, the backstory a little bit.
Well, let me do my little formal thing so it looks like we know what we're doing. But you know what? I'm going to leave this in because that's what this is all about for me. All right, you guys. So something that Russell and I were talking about is he really likes dialogue. So feel free to take the opportunity to ask questions. And if you'll put those in the chat, I'll put them in front of him. And, he's got oodles and oodles of experience in doing editorial, commercial work, a lot of experience. And one of the conversations he and I had was I was in a panic and a project that's come my way. And I was just panicked. And I thought, I know this is kind of a dumb question, but can I ask you? And he spent a lot of time helping me sort out what I was working on. And he gave me some great advice. So take advantage of getting him stuck in this chair for the next at least an hour. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Nickel, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Every week, we meet here to connect, inspire, and create with the help of a guest speaker that shares their images, stories of inspiration, and their tips to help you improve your photography skills. The schedule for our upcoming presentations is on my website at lindanickel.com. Under Happiness Hour, you'll find the links to previous sessions on my YouTube channel. Tonight's guest is Russell Graves. Russell is a Texas-based editorial and commercial photographer who sold his first image at the age of 19 and has been a working photographer for over 30 years. So there is a good chance that you've seen some of his photos or read some of his words. Russell's many projects include filming and producing a documentary called Beau Dark Goodbye, working with celebrities like Dale Earnhardt Jr., country singer and songwriter Pat Green, and many others. But his favorite subjects are the regular people that he's met across the country. In the last year or so, Russell has started leading educational photo tours. But in tonight's presentation, 30 years as a freelance photographer, Russell will share some of his stories and experiences as a professional photographer whose work has appeared in many, many magazines and for use in commercial projects for clients across the country. If you're on Instagram, you can find him at Russell Graves, or you can reach out to him through his website at russellgraves.com. Welcome to the happy hour. I screwed that one up. Welcome to the Happiness Hour, Russell.
Well, thanks for having me. I've meet the criteria because I'm pretty happy right now. So I really appreciate you asking me to do this. And how long ago was that you asked me? Do you remember? I was trying to think,
it's at least 6 months.
Okay, because I've been to Alaska a few times, and I remember when I text you back and say, "Look, I'm about to get on a float plane, and be out in the wilderness for a few days, so I'll get back with you." I do remember that. I just couldn't remember when it was.
Yeah, it was. You were doing that, and then when we actually talked, you were sitting on the balcony with a cold one. Down at South Padre, I believe. You were on a family friend vacation.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah. So it was last summer for sure. Yep. So I've been very fortunate. One, people don't say no to me very often. And recently I was told at a family dinner, it's because we're afraid. So people just don't say no. And so I've been very fortunate to have speakers booked many, many months in advance. So it's really cool.
Well,
so
awesome.
I was glad to snag you.
Well, I appreciate you asking me, and I appreciate everyone listening in. It looks like the audience keeps growing, so I'm tickled to hear that. And yeah, like you said, as we go through this, I want this. I know we've got some limitations as far as me being able to see and hear everybody, but if anyone has any questions as we go through this, including you, Linda, just ask away. And I want to make this as much of a dialogue as it is a monologue. And, I tell people a lot, what I'm going to present to you tonight isn't necessarily the right way or the wrong way or the best way. It's just my way, because as a freelancer, and I'll give you a little bit of backstory in a minute, a lot of it's just trying to figure it out as you go. And that's sort of what I've done my whole career, for better or for worse. As a photographer, I've just figured it out as I went. So I'll tell a little bit about that. So you tell me, are you ready for me to share my screen?
I'm ready for you to just take over the world here.
Okay.
It's all yours.
Let me see if I can do this correctly.
It looks good.
Are we looking good?
It looks great.
All right. So 30 years as a freelancer. Again, my name's Russell A. Graves. It's kind of crazy. When I used to, back in the 80s, when I'd look at magazines like Texas Parks and Wildlife, I noticed all the writers always put their middle initial on there. And I always thought that was kind of cool. So that's the only reason why I put A in the middle of my name, because I thought it was cool back in the 80s when I saw other writers doing it. And so I thought I'd do that myself. So every time you see my credit in a magazine or anytime I present a presentation like this, I always put Russell A. Graves. And I'm from Dodge City, Texas. I wasn't born here. I was actually born in a suburb of Dallas, It wasn't much of a suburb then. I don't think it was kind of out in the country, but I was born in Mesquite, Texas. But when I was a little boy, my family, I can't remember living down there because my family moved up to Fannin County, Texas. And I lived, for 23 years here till I graduated college at East Texas State University, and then moved out to the Texas Panhandle for a few years. But I'll talk about that too. So let's get into it. First, I think this whole talk tonight, you really got to understand sort of where I came from and how I got started, and really, and I want to talk about just sort of what motivated me in the beginning. And I'm going to do that through a series of stories, and the pictures I've selected for this presentation are just there. I curated them just out of random, just to show a selection of some of the images I've taken. But more than anything, we'll guide through some bullet points in this presentation and just kind of talk about where I all started. I'm a native Texan, born in Texas. I've always lived in Texas. And here's the key thing. And this is really a big thing for me. I've always lived in rural Texas. I mean, I told you I was born in Mesquite, which was probably a lot. Well, I know it was a lot more rural then than what it is now. But when I was a little boy, we moved to Fannin County. I lived here until I graduated college in 23. At 23, and in the same, not the same month, but in a month time span, I graduated college, got a new job, and got married. And I moved away from my boyhood home, and I moved out to the Texas Panhandle. I lived in the town of Childress, if you know where that is. And the people that know where it is will all say the same thing. I passed through there going to New Mexico or Colorado. And I lived there for 26 years. The Childress Independent School District said the magic words to me that year. And my dad had told me, don't plan on getting married unless you have a job and can support your wife. And so the Childress Independent School District said, you're hired. And I went up there and I became a teacher. And then, but my photography stuff, I'll talk about the teaching a little more in a little bit, but my photography stuff, I specialize in the stuff that's always been most familiar to me. Living in rural Texas, agriculture, outdoors, which includes hunting and fishing, rural lifestyles, and I also do some travel work for magazines on occasion, like Texas Highways, and there's another magazine called Texas Journeys, and some of those more travel oriented magazines. I do some work for those guys. And then I'm a former high school teacher. Like I mentioned, I have a degree in agricultural science, and I was an ag teacher and FFA advisor in the Childress Independent School District from 1993 until 2009, when I did what I was talking in the pregame warm up that we were having when I quit my job and decided that what I was going to do full time. And here's what I tell everybody. And this is kind of, this whole presentation sort of geared generally, and there's not really one specific thing. I'm relying on you guys to ask questions to help me be more specific, but really this has been my whole thing. If I've been good at anything, as a freelancer, I've always had a pretty good eye for opportunity, and it's about being able to spot opportunity and then trying to get yourself in front of the opportunity and take advantage of it. The photography business isn't unlike other things. It's just always look on the lookout for opportunities. Here's a few pictures here. I'll kind of go as a caveat to keep me rolling through this. This is just a good example of some of the stuff I do. One of the things I absolutely love I'm not a bird nerd. I guess I am. I know a lot of birds, but I don't go specifically looking for birds that I haven't seen before to try to add to the checklist. But the few birds I really, really, really like wild turkeys, Linda, I just love them. And where I used to live in Childress, we had a little place out in the country north of town. I actually had a turkey roost right off my fence. And so every day in the spring, these turkeys would show up in my front yard, and it was like a singles bar in my front yard. All the turkeys hanging out and gobbling at each other and trying to impress the girls. But one of the, I grew up on a small farm and ranch north of Dodge City. And in fact, one of the places that we used to farm that's been in my family since I think the 60s, I actually bought that farm 2 years ago. And that's where I'm coming. I'm not actually in the woods right now. I'm in my office in my house, but we moved into a new house we built here last spring. And so it was good to get to come back home. But I've always loved agriculture. Like I mentioned, I've got a degree in agriculture, and I love the lifestyle, and I love the challenge of it. And I love teaching it when I taught it. I love everything about the agricultural lifestyle. So all the photography I learned in the beginning was all based around what I could see out of my backyard, because I'm a blue collar kid. My dad was a welder by trade. mom was a stay-at-home mom. And so it's not like we traveled all over the world and got to see all kinds of cool stuff. So when I got my first camera, I'm going half a mile from my house or a mile from my house, just finding things that are around to try to document them and find the beauty in the things that I saw every single day. And the fact that I got to build a living around that, it feels like I'm stealing money sometimes for people. And so as I've gotten older, I've traveled a lot more, and that's kind of been by design. My wife's name is Christy, and we've been married for, I hope she's not listening to me right now, 93 to 2000. Right now is what, 28 years? Is that right?
I'm bad at math, but okay, let's go with that.
In September, yeah, it's 2022 this year. So in September, it'll be 29 years we've been married. And so we've got 2 children. I say children, they're young adults now. Our daughter's 21 and our son is 17. He's still in high school. Our daughter's going to graduate college in the spring. And so by design, early on in my freelance career, I never traveled a lot other than just a day or two here and there that I had to be somewhere overnight, because I felt like my most important job was being a husband and a father. And that's still my most important job. But since the kids are older and I've just got a lot more freedom to travel now. And so I've traveled a lot more. So through this presentation, you'll see pictures of things like elk and bear and all the other kind of crazy stuff I've gotten to see over the past few years of sort of shifted my business. And I'll talk about that some more too, as I've sort of shifted my business and really started taking on some new challenges. And I always think it's helpful to tell you about my journey and to kind of tell you that where I got here today. I'm actually 26 years old. This gray hair came from being a freelance photographer. No, I got my first camera when I was 17. I got to give credit where credit's due. I've got an older brother. His name is William. We call him Bubba, but Bubba was in the Army, and he retired from the Army after, like, I think 23 or 24 years. He's been retired for a while, but he got stationed in Alaska. And when he got sent up there, this was in the 80s. When he got sent up there, our oldest sister, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. There's sister, brother, than me. And so our oldest sister gave him a camera, and then he loved photography. So he bought him a new Canon, I think it was an A1 camera, and then sent me the old camera for me to start using. And that first camera I ever had was a Vivitar camera, all manual, and it had, the lenses were screw-on lenses. I don't know if anybody in the audience remembers those things, but it's like it took you a whole day, it felt like, to just put a lens on, because it wasn't just quick. It wasn't just put the lens in a little quarter turn and it clicks in place. You'd have to screw the lens on, but it was all manual. But I started taking pictures with it, and I got really, really good, really, really fast. And I knew that because my mama told me I was good at it. And so I believe what she said. But when I first got that camera, and I'd go out and I'd take pictures of cows, and I'd take pictures of my grandpa working cattle, or I'd take pictures of some kind of crop we were growing, or I'd find a deer or something like that. I just fell in love with it. I've always been an outdoors person and grew up in the outdoors, but just to add another element that gave me a reason to be outdoors. I fell in love with it. And one of the things too, I think helped me out, it was living in the country. We had 3 channels that we could get. We didn't have cable TV. And then the 3 channels we were lucky to get, because most of the time we only got one, unless, since I was the youngest, it was my job to do it. You have to go out on a cold night and turn the antenna towards Dallas. So maybe you could pick up a station out of Dallas to be able to watch TV coming out of there. And so growing up, I wasn't much of a TV watcher. I spent all my waking days outside because it was 7 miles to town. And before I could drive, I mean, it's not like I had any neighbors or any friends out here. I just had to kind of make my own fun with me and my brothers. So when I got that first camera, I just fell in love with photography instantly, and got really kind of practiced at it. And I tell this story a lot. About the same time, someone gave my dad a gift subscription to Texas Parks and Wildlife magazine. And I remember sitting at the table, like it was yesterday, sitting at the dinner table one night. My dad was looking at the magazine, and it had some pictures of Monaghan Sand Dune State Park in there. And it had another story in there about white-tailed deer. And my dad slid that magazine across the table to me, and he says, whenever you can start getting pictures in this magazine, you're really doing something. And so that was kind of my National Geographic moment. That's what I wanted to do. And So that's what I set out to do. I want to be a magazine photographer. And because that what I was seeing in that magazine was beautiful, and I wanted to do the same thing. So I started going through there and I started noticing, and this was my first point of encouragement. I started noticing the same names in the magazine: Steve Benson and Larry Ditto and Wyman Minzer and David Sams and Grady Allen and all these Texas photographers that were doing this great work back in the 80s for this magazine. So I sit down one day, and this is before email. I sit down one day and hand wrote letters to about 5 or 6 photographers in Texas, just saying, hey, I'm a young guy. I'm 17 years old, or I'm 18 years old. I really want to do this, and I really respect what you do. What kind of advice can you give me? And of the 6 letters I sent, I got 5 letters back.
Oh.
And I took them all to heart. I believed what they told me, and that was the encouragement it gave me. And so I remember this like it was yesterday too. When I finally felt like I was ready to be a magazine photographer, there was the chief photographer and photo editor at Texas Parks and Wildlife at the time. His name was Leroy Williamson. And this was probably 1987, 88, something like that. And I knew that it was time. My time had come. I'm going to be a magazine photographer, Linda. And so I packaged up all these pictures, and I got in my truck and I drove all the way into Dodge City, and I dropped them off at the post office. And I'm like, here it comes. I'm about to be rich and famous with this one photo submission. And those pictures got rejected by that magazine so fast, they almost beat me back to the house. And so I was discouraged, but my mom just said, keep trying. And that's what I did. And so when I was 19, you mentioned this already, I had my first photo and article published in a magazine. And the epiphany came there for me was I was always good at writing. Even when I was in school, I was always on like the UIL creative writing teams or the editorial writing team. So I always had a penchant for being able to write intelligently and write well. And so early on, I was trying to just do pictures, and I realized that I don't have what it takes. And then a guy named Larry Hodge, that's a longtime Texas freelancer, told me, he says, you need to think about writing articles and then put your own pictures with it. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. So I sent an article without even asking them. I just sent an article into a magazine. And a few months later, I was with my brother Bubba. He was home on leave, and we were over in Sherman at Walmart. And I was flipping through the magazines on the magazine aisle, and I came across this picture, and I'm thinking, this picture looks familiar. And so I started reading the article, and I'm thinking, I'm having deja vu. Where have I read this article before? And then I did the thing I should have done first. I looked at who wrote it, and it was me. And I thought, this is pretty amazing. It's pretty cool to see that. And so I bought 3 or 4 copies from the newsstand that day. And again, that was in Sherman Walmart. And a couple weeks later, I got a check for $73. And I thought, if you can make, and I wasn't even expecting to get paid for it. And I thought, if you can make money doing this, I'm in. And so from there, that was my impetus. I mean, the encouragement of my parents and the fact that I knew that I could do it, and I had the wherewithal to be in that business. And I just started really trying to refine it from there. When I was 20, I had my first magazine cover, and I'm not, this is kind of a humble brag coming here, but that was the first of about 500 to 600 magazine covers later that I've had in all that time. I've been really blessed to be able to understand how to shoot magazine covers, and I've had a ton of them. And so in my 20s, I focused on a couple of things. At the time, photography was my side hustle. I focused on becoming a better writer and becoming a better photographer. And that was in the days of film. I mean, I was shooting Kodachrome film and Fujichrome film, and had just a basic set of equipment. But the thing I knew I was good at was I could get close to animals. I just understood from being an outdoorsman my whole life. I just knew how to get close to animals. And so I worked at being a better photographer in my 20s. And even more importantly, I think, and I've said this a million times, I've never claimed to be the best photographer in the world, but I think where I've had an edge on a lot of people, I've just been better at the business at it than a lot of people have. And I credit that for my 20s, really trying to understand, it's like the conversation we had, really trying to understand the value of what you're producing and how to put a dollar figure on that value, and really trying to understand how that value, how you can manifest that value from the creative work that you do. And so and it's not an exact science, but it's something I was able to figure out and get in the ballpark pretty quick. And just started each year I'd make a little bit more and more money and at it. And so I just kept going and kept going and kept going. And when I was 29, I started making more money as a photographer than I was as a teacher. And I don't know if that's to say that how awesome the photography business had gotten or how poorly tech teachers in Texas are paid, or maybe a little bit of both. I'm not sure. That's for other people to judge. But when I was 29, that's when it happened for me. And that's when my side hustle became my main hustle and vice versa. But I love teaching high school. I loved working with high school kids, and I wasn't quite ready to give it up. Another thing that happened when I was 29 that was really encouraging, or in my late 20s, really encouraging for me. I pitched the article idea to Texas Parks and Wildlife magazine about the Pease River, and it's a pretty, as far as rivers go in Texas, it's fairly insignificant. It's dry most of the time. It's just kind of a sandy it's just a ribbon of sand that cuts through the Texas rolling plains. But, and it's not like the Brazos or the Rio Grande or the Red or or the Colorado or one of the big rivers that we think about when we think about Texas rivers. But the thing about that river that I pitched the magazine was that the historical significance of the area that river wound through. It was the heartland of the Comanches. That's where if you know the story of Quanah Parker and Cynthia Ann Parker, if you're a student of Texas history, all that went down on the Pease River. It's where the big ranching culture in Texas first took hold in Texas. We know what happened in South Texas at the King Ranch, but the Matador Ranch and the Triangle Ranch and the Four Sixes Ranch, all those big ranches happened along this Pease River corridor. And so that's what this, and it was a story about the people that live there now. And so I wrote that story and I took a lot of great pictures for it. And really wanted my pictures, because just because you write the story doesn't mean they're going to use your pictures for the article. But I really wanted to see, for the first time ever, that byline to say article and photographs by Russell Graves. And so I was in Austin for some school business, and I had a little bit of time. And I called Bill Reeves, the photo editor at Texas Parks and Wildlife at the time. And I said, hey, can I come in and meet with you? Because I want you to look at my pictures I'm going to submit to you and help me figure out what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, and just kind of I want you to be my mentor, even though you didn't offer to be my mentor, that we're going to have this meeting. You're going to tell me what I'm doing. And so he said, yeah, come on by. And so we went and ate lunch that day. And when we got back, and again, this is before digital, we got back, he turned on his light table and we threw about 5 pages of slides on the light table, and he's got the loop and he's looking at the pictures. And I'm sweating bullets thinking, man, he's about to hammer me. And I don't know if my fragile ego can take it. Cause being a man, we don't have very strong egos. We're pretty fragile. And he looks over at me and he says, you know what, Russell, I don't know what to tell you. And I said, are they that bad? He's like, no, they're that good. He said, I don't have any advice to make it any better. This is exactly what I'd be looking for. And so later on that year, when that article came out, it said article and photo by Russell Graves. And that right there at 28 or 29, when I had that sit down with him, that really gave me the confidence to know that despite my age, I can play this game with everybody. And so it really gave me a lot of encouragement. And for the next 10 years, it really helped vaulted me into the next thing, which was I spent my 30s growing my business and just trying to find more and more clients, not only doing magazine photography, but during that time, and to put it in perspective, I turned 30 in 1999. And so all the 2000s I spent growing the business, getting a lot more commercial clients. It's when digital photography came out, and it really kind of transformed the way I was doing business in a good way. And then, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then when I was 39, I quit my side hustle, which was teaching. My main hustle. It just got where I couldn't serve 2 masters. I was too busy. I was too busy with photography. I was trying to moonlight and I was pretty busy teaching. If you know anything about being an ag teacher, I didn't get summers off. I was on a 12-month contract with the school, and I was always having to go and travel. And then with the school business, but I was trying to fit these photo shoots in when I could and take time off from teaching when I could. things weren't going to work out. I couldn't serve two masters. So I finally quit. But the part about the way that, and I say all these stories that knowing that people can gather nuggets of information that can help them in their situations. But a couple of ways that digital photography really helped pivot my business in a positive way was it cost me $12 per roll for 36 pictures back when I was shooting slides. I remember one time I shot a assignment for a magazine and I shot 72 rolls of film, and I got home thinking, I don't know how in the world I'm going to pay for all this. I mean, 72 times, it cost $3 a roll. So it cost $9 to have it processed per roll. So 9 times 72 is, do the quick math. I can't do math that quick in my head. Anyway, it was going to cost a lot of money, and money that I didn't want to tie up for that long, because with the magazine business, you typically don't get paid until the pictures are published, which may be 6 months away. And so luckily I called the magazine and said, hey, y'all mind just processing these for me? That way you don't have to pay me back. And they're like, yeah, send them on in. We'll take care of it for you. But when digital came along, I realized that, the gloves were off. Not only was I unencumbered by the amount of pictures I took, but it also gave me kind of the permission to be able to kind of explore different kinds of photography, because up until probably 2002 or 2003, I would take pictures of people, but it would mainly be just kind of not really focused on it, because film was so expensive. I felt like if I was going to spend on anything, it kind of had to be what my core was, and that was nature and wildlife stuff. But when digital came along, I realized that I was pretty good at taking pictures of people doing everyday things like farmers and ranchers and anglers and hunters and all the stuff that people do out in the country, whether it's for a living or recreation. I realized that I could be pretty good at that. And so that helped launch me doing a lot of commercial work. And then about the same time, when the website of it started growing, I remember I bought russellgraves.com, the domain name, probably back in 96 or 97 when the internet first started becoming a thing. And I had a simple little website that would kind of show a few pictures of what I do. But I remember as time went on, and I knew I was going to make the switch to digital, and I knew I was going to have this huge volume of pictures. I called a web developer friend of mine. I said, can you help me out? I didn't even know what to call it, but I said, I want to build a website that has, and this is where I didn't know what to call it. I was so unsophisticated. I said, but you know what Google is? He said, yeah. I said, I want to have like a Google, but only in my website, so it can only search my site, not everybody else's. Can you do that for me? And he said, yeah. So he and I collaborated, and we put about the third iteration of russellgraves.com together that had a search engine built into it. And so then I knew, well, if I can make everybody's job around me easier, the people I'm dealing with, when it comes to looking for pictures and buying pictures. So in other words, if they can go to my site and be able to pick out pictures and download, it kind of takes some of the burden off me to try to curate it for them. And it helps me be a lot more efficient. And so that's what I did. I hired 2 high school girls, one each semester of that same year, probably 2004, that I did this. And their job was to come to my office that was in my house every day and scan slides, and then keyword slides, and then get them on my brand new website that I was doing. And then so when digital photography came out, and I kind of figured out how to work that workflow in, that part of the business really, really exploded, as far as just being a portal for rights managed, not royalty free stock photos. I don't sell my pictures for $1. They're a little more than that. And I still do that today, even though the whole industry, stock photography industry, has gone to royalty free. I'm still doing rights managed and still doing it's tapered off a little bit, but I'm still doing a pretty good business in that. And that whole part of it, I built when I was in my 30s and figured that part out. And then during my 40s, I started kind of reevaluating my business. I jokingly tell people every 10 years, when I'm about to turn the next decade old at 29, 39, and then at 49, I have a midlife crisis, and I start kind of repositioning what I'm going to do. At 29, I decided I was working too hard in teaching, and I wanted to live a life of more adventure. And so I refocused my efforts, like we talked about here. When I was 39, I quit my job teaching. That if I would still be teaching, I'd be retiring from teaching next year. That's what I look at. But I wouldn't have been happy. And then when I was 49, we had the coolest little place in Childress and had made a life there. And we decided that, you know what, we want to move back to where we were from. And so we bought this farm and moved back within a mile of where I grew up. And, but during my 40s, I started reevaluating the whole business and what I was doing and doing a lot more things like video. And that you brought that up about that Boat Art Goodbye. I'd never done a video project before. That was my very first one. And it actually, I wrote a magazine story about that lake that was going to be built along this creek that I'd spent my boyhood on. And so the whole article was about a canoe trip my brother and I took. It's a 60-mile long creek, and we put the canoe into where you could float, and over 3 days floated all the way to where it runs into the Red River. And I wrote this magazine story about it and shot the pictures for it. And then after I got the magazine story wrote, I realized, because I was getting interested in video, I realized that this is like a script. And so we went back and we spent probably a week going to different places on the creek and refilming some of our adventure. And so I made this documentary film and thought, it's okay. It's not good enough for a national audience, but it taught me something, that the story is what matters. And the story resonated with a lot of people, and it got picked up for national distribution. It was on national television, and it was the highest rated documentary on that network for that year. And it amazed me, and how much traction that got, and how many people saw that, and how much email I got from people all over the country that I didn't know that the story resonated with. And so I started kind of looking at doing more things like that, and sort of looking at my business from a vertical standpoint. What's the core of my business, and what are these things that are related, like video, that I can sort of do and still maintain who I am professionally, but still be able to kind of bring in these other technologies that I'd never, wasn't traditionally what I wasn't traditionally. I was never trained to do any of it, but things I didn't traditionally learn, but things I was willing to sort of take on as time went on. And then now I'm in my early 50s. I'm launching even more projects as we speak. The whole video part and the YouTube stuff and the educational stuff has really become a lot more core of what I'm doing now. And I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. And it's just I'm pretty excited about what's ahead of me right now. And just a few more pictures. This picture in the lower right.
Let me interrupt you real quick so that we can catch it right here. Can you, that documentary, say the name, and then where can we find it? Is that anywhere?
It's on my website, russellgraves.com. It's not a long watch. I think it's 42 minutes long. It's on my website on the video section. I think it still is. I've been rejiggering some of that stuff, so it may not be on there right now, but I think it is. But you can find it there, and it's called Boat Art Goodbye, but it's Boat Art is a French name, and it's spelled BOISD''ARC. It's means wood of the bow, and Boat Art is a type of tree that's the first botanical record ever made was made just probably about a mile from where I am right now.
Oh, wow.
So it's a tree that's really steeped in local folklore around here, but it's called Osage orange in other places, but it's the Boat Art tree.
Okay, thank you.
Or horse apples.
Horse apple. Okay.
Yep. There, see the picture of the girl holding the pumpkins? That's my sweet baby girl. No one ever told me when you have kids, if you feed them and love on them, they grow up on you. But that happened. She's 21 now. So that was for a magazine shoot I did about pumpkin farms in Texas. And so I learned pretty quick that homemade models work really, really cheap. And so I took my own models out there and we photographed it for the story. One of the places in the lower right I fallen in love with is kind of a second home. I've spent so much time up there, but Alaska. And I know it sounds, everybody says, oh, Alaska is so awesome, but it really is. I mean, it's pretty cool. And especially to get to see Alaska the way I've gotten to see it over the past couple of years, it's pretty rewarding. I tell people I get a backstage pass behind everything that's cool. And so I'm going to talk about how the business is structured. I can go into each one of these more specifically if anybody wants to hear it. I'll just let everybody ask a question about each part of the business, but I'm going to talk about how my business is structured, because the key point is being a freelancer and making my living from it is not, I don't have all my eggs in one basket. And so at the core, I do photography, both editorial and commercial. And if you don't know what that means, editorial, I shoot for a lot of magazines and do a lot of magazine projects still. I've got 2 magazine articles that I've got to write this month, and also provide the photos for those things as well. And then I also do commercial photography, but I'm doing less and less uh, for a couple of reasons. One, commercial photography can be lucrative, but it's also a big grind because there's a lot of pressure on you to it's typical corporate stuff, and I shouldn't be so hard on it because it's like when you're young and you break up with somebody and you're like, oh no, it's not you, it's me. That's kind of how my slow breakup with commercial photography has been. It's it's so corporatized. You have these big meetings that people will say, well, we got to have the right kind of look and feel. And I would joke with people and say, well, you can have the look or you can have the feel, but you can't have both. And, there'd be these real nebulous conversations you have about what they want. But the bottom line is nobody knew what they wanted. And so then it's up to you to try to decipher all these varying opinions that you heard and go out and shoot the pictures they want. And sometimes, most of the time it worked out fine, but every now and then when it didn't, it was just maddening. You'd have this whole thing about, well, you just got to be better at communicating what you want, or, and we just got to figure this out more. And so the commercial part became too much of a job that I wasn't enjoying as much. And it was mainly, I did it in the most of my commercial work was in the hunting industry too. And that's why one of my clients that I had for a few years was, if you remember the TV show Duck Dynasty, I shot pictures for those guys for their merchandise and their books and all the other side projects they did. I did a lot of their work for them. And they were fine to work with, but a lot of the manufacturers I'd worked for, it just became where it wasn't as fun anymore. And so that's why I've been slowly getting out of the commercial work. I tell people, if you like to hunt, fish, or like the outdoors, or like to travel, or seen a magazine with the name Texas in it, you've probably seen my work before. And so photography, I do both writing and commercial, or both. Oops, gummit. Hang on, let me start over. And then, as part of in my same silo and my vertical business model that I have for myself, I also do a lot of writing. I mentioned that in the beginning, that I've always had a pretty good penchant for being a writer. And so writing is a little more work for me than photography is. I mean, I enjoy writing. I enjoy photography more. Given the choice, I'd rather go out and take pictures instead of sitting behind a desk or sitting with my laptop out writing something. But I still write for a lot of magazine clients. I like the process of developing story ideas for magazines and pitching those ideas to them, and getting to see that whole creation come to life, and getting to be able to work on the product from the beginning of coming up with an idea and pitching the idea to them and getting it accepted, and then seeing it all in print in the end. That's still, I've had tens of thousands of pictures in magazines in my lifetime, and I still get a kick out of when I see them in magazines and see my name beside it. I still think that's the coolest thing. And then I've got a few corporate clients I'll do some projects for from time to time. And a lot of those projects for the corporate side, maybe anything from doing a market analysis of something to writing a white paper about something else that they're involved in. It's non-technical writing, but it's just they a lot of times these corporate clients will need freelancers, and I'll just freelance for a few different corporate clients as well. And then I also will do a book from time to time. Right now, I've had six books published, and I've got 2 more in the pipeline right now. And the book things, there's I'm not even going to say that reference because I don't want it to be misunderstood. I used to compare myself to an actor who got in a lot of trouble. But before he got in a lot of trouble, I used to compare myself to him because this actor was really good at TV stuff, but every time he'd make a movie, it'd be a flop. And that's kind of how my deals have been with books. I'm really good at the magazine stuff, but every time I come out with a book, I've done 6 books, and 2 of them have done really well, but the other 4, and that may be standard in the book industry, I don't know, but the other 4 have been just kind of tepid. I mean, it's cool to go into a Barnes and Noble and see your book you wrote on the shelf, and it's cool to say, oh yeah, I've written books before, but from a strictly financial standpoint, 4 of those books I've done, at least two of the 6 books I've done have been a waste of my time. If I put a dollar figure to the time I put into them, it really wasn't worth it. And that, that's probably a combination of things. It probably starts with me. It wasn't a well thought out idea, number one. Number two, it makes a big difference the publishers you get on how much they're going to market your book, because books are like a marathon. I mean, like a sprint, not a marathon. You've got about a month for this thing to really latch a hold. And if it doesn't, they're going to move on to what's next coming up. So you got to really get on it quick. And so, like I said, 2 of the books I've done, the first book I did when I was 27 years old. And that's one of the things that helped me make more money as a creative person than it did as I wrote and photographed the whole book. And my first 2 books, one came out when I was 27, the other one came out when I was 29. And that book that came out when I was 29 is what helped pay for my kids to go to college. So both of those books did really well. The next couple of books I did not do very well. And the last 2 books I've done have done okay. I mean, so I'm learning as I go. I actually took about a 10-year hiatus from doing books, but I've got a couple of, again, in the pipeline right now. That's sort of that I hope to be finishing fairly soon. This was a great little growing business model right here. This next part, speaking engagements. And I've always been really willing to go and speak to photo clubs for nothing, just because, again, what I said in the beginning, it's a joy to get to talk about photography with like-minded people. But I'd kind of found a niche where more and more, organizations or associations or corporate places, they just want to hear good stories about a guy that's lived what they consider to be kind of a cool lifestyle. And so I was getting where I was kind of, doing pretty good as a paid speaker. And then have y'all heard of this thing called COVID-19? Has anybody heard of that before? And then that happened, and it cratered all of that. And so who knows if that'll come back? I've got a couple of good leads to start over again. But when that happened, and because of all the variants that are going on and all the nonsense that we're still being faced with, I just don't think people know enough to be comfortable to book any speakers right now. So who knows if that'll come back or not? But when it does, I'm ready, because that speaking engagements was a good growing part of my business. And and if you think about, one of the first things I said was always being on the lookout for opportunities. That's really the key to being a freelancer. And so that's what I've always tried to do. And that's how I've built these individual pieces of my business to start just kind of building multiple streams of income. And then one of the things that I started doing about 4 years ago is I started doing educational photo tours. And I actually went on a tour myself and met the owner of the company and hit it off with him. We became personal friends. And so we decided that I'm going to start leading photo tours. They handle all the logistics. All I've got to do is go out and take people out and talk photography and see some cool places and teach them a little bit about using their cameras and a little bit about wildlife and nature. And I'll tell you what, I should have done that 20 years ago, because that is so much fun. I'm having such a good time doing those photo tours. Just to get, again, people. That's where I met Jane. That's what Jane went on a trip with me to the Rocky Mountain National Park. And I think I saw another name that was with us on that trip too, Dorothy. I think that's who's on here too. They went with me on that trip, and again, it's they may say something different, but I know I have a pretty good time. But it's been a lot of fun. In fact, I'm leaving Saturday for the Everglades. We're doing a birding tour down there, and just the places I've got to see and the places I've got to go, and most importantly, the people I've got to meet who share the love of nature and photography like I do. It's just been a lot of fun, and that part's been really rewarding. And so all of a sudden I've figured out a hustle where I can take my love of teaching, because one thing I didn't say, and it's not germane, I don't want to sound like I'm patting myself on the back at every turn here, but since you asked the question, when I was an ag teacher in Texas, I was named Texas Agri-Science Teacher of the Year on 3 occasions and was the national finalist for the award on 2 occasions. And so when I was a high school teacher, I really took the job serious, and I loved teaching. I love my students. I love my students' families. I love the school environment. I love everything about that. And so taking a hiatus out of the classroom for a few years and then finally getting to kind of go back into a different classroom by doing these educational photo tours. It's taken really, I think, my two callings in life, one being a teacher, another one doing photography. And it's really kind of married them to a way that it's been a lot of fun doing that. And I'm at the point now, like I mentioned earlier, my kids are grown. I'm still their dad. I'll always be their dad, but they don't need dad to be here every single day. And so it's given me the freedom to be able to travel, and my wife will travel with me some and go on some of these trips with me. And it's been rewarding. But if you ever want to go with me, Backcountry Journeys, that's who I booked through. And then doing more and more video projects. The video stuff has been something I've been doing on the side for about probably 8 years now. I've got a few corporate clients and a few civic clients I work with on video projects. But the video stuff is one of the things I'm doing more and more with over time. And it kind of goes back to teaching. One of the things that I do, this is, I'm not getting rich off these video projects, but it's just a springboard. Sometimes and this is a good thing to learn if you're an aspiring freelancer, sometimes retailers do this all the time. Like Walmart, for example, there's a retail concept called loss leaders. And so what Walmart will do is they may say, we'll sell you a 6-pack of Dr. Peppers for $1. They're losing money on that, but they're hoping you'll come into the store and then they'll present you with other opportunities. So some of my video projects I do, not all of them, but a few of them I do, are kind of loss leaders. I don't make a pile of money off of them. It's kind of worth my time. I'm not losing money off of them, but it's just being able to springboard into other things. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the things I do once a month for a platform called Hobby Farms is I'll do an educational video about something to think about you can do on a small farm. Like this week, I produced 2 videos. One was refurbishing, they haven't came out yet. One's refurbishing an old porcelain farm sink, and the other one is on how to use a laser transit or laser level to figure out the slope on your property. And so I'll do those projects like that kind of marries my love of teaching and agriculture and being able to present those things. And it's just one of those little pieces of what I do. None of these things we're talking about necessarily keeps me busy all the time, but all of them together kind of provides a good basis, good living, and provides me with a good basis. And then I'm delving into other areas slowly. Like I've got the side project that we haven't talked about, Lynn. It's called Wildlife Photo.
No, this one we haven't talked about. So, yeah, okay.
Wildlife Photo Show. And then I've got a couple of TV projects kind of on the side burner that I'm sort of simmering. I don't know what they're going to turn out, but the Wildlife Photo Show, it's a dedicated website for all my wildlife video projects I'm doing. And I'll do webinars for Backcountry Journeys, and then they get rebroadcast on that site. So there's a lot of webinar content on there, and there's a lot of, hey, I'm going out and I'm shooting pictures, and there's more and more kind of gear oriented stuff. So everything's kind of geared educationally on that Wildlife Photo Show, but that site's growing as well. So, but that's kind of the basis of sort of what I do and how I make my living. And again, if anybody wants to talk about the nuts and bolts of any one of these individual things that I do, feel free to drop a question in there, and I'll answer them as best I can.
Let me go ahead and squeeze in a couple of questions before you go to the next. And maybe you're going to cover it, I'm not sure, but I wanted to make sure that I had some time to ask you this. Mika is in here, and she wanted to know, are there any advantages or disadvantages of copyright options and what to stay away from as a photographer?
I'm not sure. You might clarify that a little bit. I'm not sure on advantages or disadvantages, but I mean, as a general rule, I always own the creative content I produce. Okay. And there's some times that, and again, it's you sort of pick your battles at some point, because some of the work, and I've gotten pretty good at predicting some of the work that I do. I know, like I mentioned the Duck Dynasty guys, I knew when I did the work for them, there's no life to that work beyond what I did for them. And so I try to make my money off them up front, knowing there's no residual to that. still own the copyright on it, but I'm not going to get bent out of shape if that our license agreement or contract that we have doesn't get followed to the T. I'll do other shoots, and one of the things I've always done, I used to do from a commercial standpoint, was realize that if I go take pictures for a company, a camouflage company like Realtree, I realize that not only do the pictures I take for them have value for their marketing collateral, but also has value for me as stock. And I would negotiate a lower rate for them, for me to be able to retain ownership of all the pictures. So I'd essentially lease them the pictures to them for a specified term. I'd own them because I knew I could extract value from a stock photography standpoint over time out of those same images. If you look at this month's Texas Parks and Wildlife, there's a double page picture in there of a burrowing owl in the snow that I took. I took that picture over 20 years ago.
So
that's what I mean. Over time, if you've done it enough, you start learning to recognize that I can predict what pictures of mine will have value over time. And so from to answer the question, always keep your copyright. If they're willing to, if a company wants to, that's what we talked about in our conversation. If they want to own the picture, it's just going to cost them a lot more money. And that's a conversation you have with them. And once you start having that conversation, either they'll double down and say, okay, yeah, it's worth it to us, we'll pay it. Or number two, they'll say, well, I didn't think about it that way. So I'll pay what your fee is and you keep the copyright. And that's the second part's usually how that works out for me. But I think, like I told you in our conversation, Linda, the one thing I argue a lot with people is when it's not, when you're talking licensing fees on pictures, you're talking, a lot of times at the most, I'm talking numbers in the thousands, not in the millions. And so a conversation I have with a lot of commercial clients that want to use it, when they start balking at the price, I'll tell them I'm the cheapest guy in the room. Everything that you own costs more than what I'm asking you to pay me for this. And usually when you put it like that too, they're like, oh, okay, we didn't think about it that way. I did a project. This is kind of an industrial project, but I documented a big infrastructure, electrical infrastructure project for a company a few years ago. And I was telling them what my day rate was, and they balked at it because they were going to hire me for 5 days. And they thought that's way too much money. And I told them, because I knew what it cost them, because I'd done my research. I said, one tower that you put up costs you $300,000. One tower. And you're talking about these big electrical towers, right? They have the wires on them where they move electricity around the state. One tower costs you $300,000. This is like a $500 million project. And you're going to balk at what I'm offering is what it's going to cost me for you to show this project off to everybody and hopefully get you another $500 million project.
Yep.
Like, well, once you put it that way, it all kind of makes sense now. So, and I'm nice with the one I sound like there. I kind of cut to the chase there, but that's kind of the conversation you got to have. But always try to keep your copyright unless they're willing to pay you a lot of money. Because a lot of these things, like I mentioned on that one article, that one picture in Texas Parks and Wildlife this month, I shot it in 1999. I remember when I shot it. It was New Year's Day of 1999 is when I shot it.
And it still has legs.
Still has legs after all these years.
That's great. So there's a question in here. I think it's from Karen, even though it says Linda Nickel. I think Karen's using my alias tonight. She says, do you sell your stock photos off your website, or do you use a stock photo company?
Both.
Okay.
So I've got a couple of agencies I've got one agency that represents my work in the outdoors industry. I've got another agency that represents my work in the agriculture industry. But both of those agencies in a year won't sell what I sell myself in a month. So I usually try to represent myself and I'm like any other kind of sales organization on the stock photo stuff. Is I've got kind of an average I try to hit on the number of downloads I get per day. And so I'll work to try to get to that number every single day, because that's one of the pieces of what I do in the business, to try to, support this lavish lifestyle that I lead.
So I have a question on you pitching articles or pitching projects. So you've got something in mind, and you gather all your stuff, and I'm assuming you target a specific client, a specific magazine.
I do, yeah.
What are your hit rates? Like,
pretty good now. Well, I say, let me qualify that. The magazines I've worked with before, it's pretty good. I mean, I kind of have an understanding of what they need, and I'm going to say probably, and they're not big presentations I put together for them, but usually I'll say, what do you think about, I'll send them 4 or 5 ideas. What do you think about these ideas? So usually probably at least a third or to a half of the ideas I pitch will get picked up by the magazines I've worked with before. And most of the time it's a no, but it's only a no for right now because they've got a editorial calendar, and they've only got so much space in a given year, and they haven't looked at the next year. So it may be no for this year, but it gets picked up a year or so from now. So
yeah,
I've got that going for it. With new magazines that I haven't worked with before. And so the way that part of the business works is it's sort of a war of attrition. You get these people that you worked with for a while and you become comfortable with them, and all of a sudden the person you worked with, they retire or they go get another job.
Right.
So then hopefully they put in a good word for you for the next guy, but usually the next guy coming in kind of has his people he's been working with. And so it's a constant war of attrition where you're trying to keep up with your existing clients, but you're always trying to recruit new clients because the existing clients may take a downward turn. And then with the magazine business, it's the bad news is it has changed a little bit. The good news is people said back in the 90s when the internet first came out that magazines were going to die. And the fact is they just haven't. I would argue if you go into a Barnes and Noble right now and count how many magazines are on the shelf, there's more magazines now than there has been because the industry has changed. Now there may not be room for a weekly magazine like a Time magazine anymore because you can get all that news on the internet quick. But I think what you're starting to see in that industry are magazines are becoming the ones that are starting to evolve are becoming they're bigger format. They're remember like the old Life magazines, how big they were?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Magazines are starting to get bigger, and all of a sudden they're putting them on really, really fancy, nice paper, and they're starting to come out like bi-monthly or quarterly. But when they come out, they're more like a mini book instead of just a typical cheap magazine printed on cheap paper. And so that. So the quality seems to be going up. The frequencies seems to be going down, but the quality seems to be going up in them. And so that's one of the things that I just, I continually look forward to try to evolve with the business and just try to stay on top of it that way. But with the new magazine, and I'm always pitching the new magazines that I haven't worked with before. It depends on the magazine. So if I'll take one we talked about, I don't mind saying their name right now. I have about a 0% success rate with Texas Monthly Magazine. For whatever reason, I'll just tell everybody else, like I told you, I kind of feel like because I'm not one of the cool kids from Austin is why I don't get picked for them. But, life goes on but other magazines, it's a process. I mean, if anybody's in the sales business, that the first time you knock on somebody's door, proverbial door, so to speak, it's going to be a no. And it takes several touches before that no becomes a maybe, before it becomes actual work. And that's just part of what I learned early on. It's a process, and it's not ever, it's like I said earlier, it's not no forever. It's just no right now because people are in a different, in the magazine business or the commercial photography business or any kind of genre I do, it's sort of the same. It's like any other kind of buying cycle. It's like you buying a car. You may not be ready to buy a car today, but at some point you're going to be. And so what I hope to do is to stay on top of their mind. So when they are ready to buy that proverbial car, that they think of me and they're ready to come back to me at that point. So
you have a lot of stuff, I kind of, I knew that you were doing magazine work, and I knew that you were dabbling in books, and then I'm starting to see a lot of this video stuff that we've been talking about. So there's just a lot of little things that you've got your fingers in. And do you see, where do you see yourself in like 10, 15 years from now? Are you really because I really believe that video is that's what people are drawn to. It's easy, it's visual.
Yeah. That's something that I think about a lot, because I've got to, at some point I got to figure out what my old man job is going to be. And, I don't know. It's probably going to be a little bit more educational stuff, because I realize there's value in what I know. I mean, for a long time, I would think about myself and think, well, what do I know? I mean, I'm not, I'm like anybody else with the camera, but, as I've matured, you kind of realize that, well, maybe I do have a different perspective, and maybe I do have a different way of saying things than other people. And maybe what I do have to say is there's some value to it, and people are willing to sit down and listen to what you have to say. And I think there's probably going to be more of that. The commercial work, unless, like I said earlier about the commercial work, it wasn't them so much, it was me. I'll just be blunt with it. I know hunting is a hotbed issue and fishing is a hotbed issue with some people, and I don't want to get into the politics of whether or not you should not hunt. The fact is, hunting is a legal activity, and I could argue all day long about why it's an ecologically sound practice to do, especially the way we do it here in Texas. But from an industry standpoint, the hunting industry puts more stock into people. I'm going to try to say this as nicely as I can. A lot of the hunting industry puts more stock into people who have big social media followings and may or may not have really good skills, but they look good on camera, and they may be willing to show various amounts of skin to try to get the attention, sure, the likes on social media.
Sure.
And that's where I didn't like the way the industry was heading in that direction. And, it's like a lot of industries, there's a lot of sheep in that industry. And so where one was heading that way, they all start kind of going that way. And I didn't like the way it was headed. So I just decided, you know what, I wish everybody well that I've done work with before, but I don't want to do that work anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I still love hunting. I mean, that's part of who I am, part of how I grew up, part of rural culture that I grew up in. And as a family, we still do some of that. I just don't participate in the business side of it anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the commercial work, probably more agriculture stuff. The editorial work, I like exactly where I'm at right now. Probably more educational stuff. And we'll see. I don't know. The cool thing about being a freelancer is I set my schedule every single day, and I'll wake up and I decide which way the wind's blowing on that particular day. And kind of, if something interests me, I've got the freedom to be able to carve out the time I need to pursue that.
And that's what's been kind of fun with you. I'll just say, hey, do you have what time's good for you? And you're like, I work for myself. You can call me anytime you want. Yeah. So that works out. That has worked out great for me.
I do. It's it is. It's one of the things I take pride in. And I also like the ability of being a freelancer and being my own boss and being self-employed, that I can, the way my work schedule works now is I'll be pretty busy for about a week, and then I may really have nothing to do for about a month after that.
Yeah.
And that's by design. I'll work really hard for at short periods of time, and then I just kind of do what I want to do for the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever.
So, okay. So I'm gonna I can sit here, you and I can sit here, because we've been we've chatted for longer than probably you wanted to, but I actually enjoy sitting here and talking about business because I don't do that. I'm not in the business of this. This is all fun and games for me, but I find it fascinating. And every once in a while I get an opportunity to, have one of my prints, published. So I'm fascinated by how the business works. So do you want to maybe kind of wrap up? Is there like a takeaway that you're like, don't forget to do this, or this is the secret to staying in this business?
I do. And I don't know what, I'll just make this offer right now. I don't know kind of if you have to have a hard stop for what you do with this video afterwards, but if anybody wants to everybody jump on live and we can talk afterwards too. I'm willing
Yeah,
to
we
do
will.
that
Yeah,
as well.
we'll do the hard stop here. And if anybody wants to, because it's
Can you
kind of like, I like the little mixer at front. And then if anybody wants to stick around and ask those questions,
can
that
you
comes to you after we've stopped it,
okay? Can you still
they're
see
welcome
my
to.
Can you still see my screen?
I do not. No, you gotta go back to share it.
Uh-oh. Okay, how about now?
Now I see the bear. Yep.
Okay.
And is that a little pica?
It is a pica. I'll there's a couple more informational slides on here. I'll go
Okay.
through really, really quick and then
Okay.
we can open it up. Here's my tips for a freelancer. Understand the photography business is a business, and it's like we've talked a lot about that today already. It's a business, and the more you understand about the business, the less likely you're to be taken advantage of, period.
Yep.
And then here's the next thing, and this is one thing I'm really sensitive about. If someone approaches you about using one of your pictures and say, well, I'll give you a photo credit because it's a great picture, ask them if they work for a credit at their place. I mean, even not, and I get this a lot, and I don't mean to sound hard on this, but I'll get calls from these very random nonprofits, and they'll say, well, we're a nonprofit. And I'm like, everybody there is getting paid. They don't use that approach when they're going to buy copy paper. They don't go to Staples and say, hey, look, we're a nonprofit. We'll give you a credit if you'll give us copy paper. I mean, they got to pay for all that stuff. And so my advice to everybody is if your photo is good enough for someone to use it on something they're doing and try to make money, you need to be paid for it. And then photo credits won't pay the bills. Because who looks at photo credits? Other photographers. And other photographers are not customers.
Yep.
Because every other photographer thinks, well, I can do that myself. And so that's one thing I'm adamant about. And I try to coach that people all the time. So if someone, and I don't have a lock on taking good pictures. I'm probably not that good at it on the big scheme of things. But if someone has a picture that someone wants to use for their annual for a brochure or their annual report or something like that, then if you don't get paid money for it, figure out some way to barter for it and get paid for it. And I've done some of that. I love trading stuff. And so I've traded all kinds of stuff for work I've done before. And so it's value for value. So that's the way I look at it. And then as you notice on me, it helps to develop multiple streams of income. Any one of those things I told you about earlier would be hard to make a living at, but when you have multiple streams, you can, if the speaking part's down like it has been, well, I can put my efforts into building something else up to take the place of that. And so when you kind of put it all together, then it's when you have multiple streams of income, it really helps. When one thing's down, other stuff can be up. And then figure out your niche and exploit it. My niche has always been all centered around rural Texas, and that's what I've exploited. And that's really the big thing is figure out what you're good at and just go be good at it. And I decided a long time ago who I wanted to be, and I went and become that person. And so that's really the best advice I can give anybody. One of the things I want to really talk about too, and I don't want to sound too sappy when I say this, and that's why I'm always willing to talk photography and the business of photography with anybody. I alluded to it earlier. I'm the youngest child of 5 on a dad from a blue collar family. My dad was a welder when the welders didn't get paid what they get paid today. I mean, now you can be a pipeline welder and make 6 figures a year, but he didn't make 6 figures a year. He was a welder for a paving company, and he was a hard worker, and he taught me how to work hard. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and so we didn't come from a lot of money. And the fact that I developed a skill with the help of other people and the encouragement of other people, the fact that I developed a skill that changed my family financial tree, my personal family financial tree for the better. And I've been able to raise my kid. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say like I'm Ted Turner or T. Boone Pickens rich. I'm not that at all. But financially, I've been able to do a lot more in my life and a lot more to come than how I was raised, and have been able to give my kids just a lifestyle that I didn't have, and I'm not bitter about that I didn't have growing up. But the fact that I was able to figure out how to push a button on a camera and create something that other people found value in, I've never taken that for granted. It's always been a joy to be able to know that I've made a good living doing this for a long time now and continue to make a good living off doing it. And the fact that that's a fact that's not lost on me. I'm just so thankful and been so blessed with what I've been able to do and the places I've been able to go and the people I've been able to meet and the people that I get to help and mentor along the way, just like I was offered to me. And so with that said, oh, look at that little blue-eyed boy. He's 17 now. That was his first piece of watermelon he ever ate.
He's probably cringing that this is out here.
No, he loves that picture. So with what I said, I'm just going to put this up here and encourage everybody to stay in touch. But like I said, if we need to do an after party, I can certainly hang around and we can talk about whatever live if you want to.
Okay.
But
yeah, we can do that.
If anybody wants to stay in touch, there's the ways to get a hold of me. Here's my email address, my wildlifephotoshow.com, like I mentioned. russellgraves.com is kind of my main portal. And then Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm not really big on social media. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it. It's a necessary evil to my business, but if I'll go in spurts. Sometimes I'll post a lot, other times I won't. And right now I'm at a point where I haven't been posting a whole lot.
Well,
because no matter what here's why I have a love-hate relationship with it. No matter how politically astute that me or anybody else thinks that they are, you're never going to change anybody else's mind. So I get tired of looking at all the politics that social media has on it. So that's why I kind of stay away from it for a while.
I completely get that.
Yep. So anyway, that's my story.
It was a wonderful story. So, okay, let me get you to take that screen down and let me properly thank you for coming on and doing this because, every time I reach out to people and just say, hey, my name's Linda, would you come do this? And it just always blows me away when people say, yeah, I'll do it. And you were definitely one of those people that I didn't expect to say yes. And I was super excited that you do this. But more importantly, personally, you and I've had a couple of conversations and I without going into too much detail, one of the things that I was kind of stumbling over is like, hey, someone's approached me about a photo and I just did not know what to do. And I have a lot of resources and I reached out to a lot of my friends that have done a lot of big projects. And after, 30 minutes with you, it's like, it's a done deal. It's just, I know what to do now. I was very calm. You just kind of made it easier. And, I don't know that you consider yourself a mentor to me, but I certainly do. And I'm certainly not done with you. So you're kind of stuck with me.
That's all right.
So with that, thank you so much. You guys, you can connect with Russell again on Instagram at Russell Graves, but you might want to try his website, russellgraves.com, because he probably spends a little bit more time there. Next week, Dawn Simpson will be back here to present hybrid photography with a twist. And Dawn's going to show us how to create a unique business card or whatever else you want to turn it into by using an app called Live Portrait. So I've put a very detailed description of that class on my website, lindanickel.com. So please take a look at Dawn's class so that you can participate in that session. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful. And I hope that we see you again soon.